Hello and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dudley Boys of What Culture, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts, where we review Raw, SmackDown, we review the Wednesday night war between AEW and NXT. We also review pay-per-views, we have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on wrestle culture. But gents, we are gathered here today to talk about AEW Wednesday Night Dynamite, that show that is going to be launching in less than 2 weeks now. We've seen the first episode of NXT on USA Network. So my question to you two is, what does AEW need to do on its debut?
But before we get into it, I just need to say that you look like a pipe-to-pipe bushman in that T-shirt. It's one of the worst T-shirts I've ever seen.
It's dividing opinion, I'll give you that.
I want Baltimore from that wardrobe.
So NXT, we reviewed it earlier on this week. A generally enjoyable show. I feel like there was elements that they possibly were holding back on so they could really go full throttle when they are going head-to-head with AEW. AEW... obviously launching 2 weeks after NXT. So what do they need to do? What can we expect from them?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Sidgwick can have the other 29 minutes. Ultimately, not a great deal. In our podcast comments after they get posted, I think Michael Sidgwick, unfairly in my opinion, takes a lot of coarse abuse for being overly negative towards WWE. I think we're reasonably a good mix of objective and subjective about that product. He's fawning about AEW, and I like that, right? I'm not, but I like that. Him, Andy Murray, others in this office that are very excited about the true alternative that AEW can provide and probably will for about 6 weeks. And what I like about that is that so far they've created an atmosphere amongst their audience that are very, very thirsty for the content they're providing and putting out. So I don't think they'll change too much from what they've done so far because it's been so satisfying to so many people. It matters not who they're going to attract in the sort of casual fans. Very, very different to NXT, in fact. When it launches on TNT, the casual audience, I don't think is going to be who they're going to be looking to satisfy. They're going to try and do as much as what they've done on the pay-per-view so far, as much as what they've done brilliantly at times on the Road 2 series, lesser so on being the Elite. And I think plenty of that for the first 2 or 3 months will feel like they've got sustained momentum. There's great wrestlers, there's potentially great matches, there's big matches for the posters. If you think about like the Moxley Omega announcement for Full Gear, immediately made that pay-per-view feel important, even though it's maybe too soon to run another big show. I think they've got themselves well set up for a solid 6 months without needing to find a way to reinvent the wheel again. I'm curious after that as to what they have to do, because very quickly they'll run out of their dream matches. That's got to be a concern because these guys haven't been weekly wrestlers before.
Like you said, you're excited about this.
Yeah, tremendously.
And the pay-per-views have obviously delivered way far and above what we'd probably expected for a start-up, to be perfectly honest. But the difficulty comes now, or the pressure comes now, to produce a weekly product.
Yes, absolutely. And I will immediately disagree with my esteemed colleague here, Michael Hamflett, Stamford Mike, Titan Hamflett.
New York Titan, please.
The biggest WWE market, and an absolute revelation how much he loves this company for reasons that he grew up with and that aren't given to him anymore. I disagree comprehensively with the whole they'll run out of dream matches soon enough, because one thing I've ascertained from the road to TNT is that they are already the best promotion, arguably in the world, that I watch frequently at building and promoting and hyping people up for matches, often over the course of a single promo. Like the work with Cody and Sean Spears, it was Stardust versus Ty Dillinger for all intents and purposes. Neither performer is in that stratosphere where you can just run a very solid angle, like, to be fair, NXT did with Kushida and Walter. Nothing inspired about it whatsoever, nothing creative, just a standard bread and butter angle. But because the match graphic looks so good, people are excited about this match.
Yeah.
It's different with AEW. They've got that. They had it with Kenny Omega and Pac, but they've also got, for me, already a more in-depth ability to tell stories into hype matches. So if, in fact, the philosophy that they've cultivated on the Road 2 series is adapted to TNT, I think we can expect a far richer and more different blend of storytelling than we've seen.
before we get on to Cody Rhodes talking about it being 3 hours and airing stuff on Bleacher Report, before we get into all that, obviously the figures came out for NXT, their first show on the USA Network recently, pretty much 1.2 million, basically. Can AEW beat NXT? And arguably more importantly, how will they affect NXT's numbers going forward?
It's the great unknown.
And it is great.
Yeah,
so
it is.
exciting to ponder all this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the great unknown. Here's my probably wildly uninformed, subjective take. I think genuinely they've lost a bit of momentum, but I think that first episode on TNT will get 2 million ballpark.
Because the general consensus is it's going to do 500,000, 800,000.
It's the best rating they'll do for years, if not ever.
This NXT number has, I think, created the idea that AEW could do 1 to 2 million, could do 7 figures. Because I don't sense that anybody thought 7 figures was coming NXT's way. So the suggestion is that the audience is relatively similar. There was going to be some casual channel hopping fans on USA, just like there will be on TNT. But then there's also a hardcore base that felt, underserved by Raw and SmackDown and have gone to NXT as they would have done at takeovers and as they've probably been doing for AEW pay-per-views. So I don't think it's that wild a prediction to go to. It's, again, we're all coming at this from a very uninformed base, because I think even Dave Meltzer himself was looking at 500,000 or thereabouts of both. So he's half right on NXT so far. So will he now will he reconsider that? Will he speak to various television bodies and try and get a different assessment of that? Will that even be relevant? I don't know. The reach of TNT is greater than USA Network, I believe. But percentage-wise, are they going to be able to tap into the people that maybe aren't traditionally WWE fans, the guys that never came back when WWE went out of business? AEW, if they can find them, then the sky's the limit. But are they just going to be dealing with the other people that are just maybe not that fussed about NXT this week? Is there going to be a Monday Night Wars idea where there's people picking and choosing?
When I say can they beat NXT, I'm not saying are they going to do a better first figure than NXT, because there was no competition wrestling-wise for the first NXT show on USA Network. But I've seen a lot of comments from people online who were saying basically I'll probably just catch up with NXT on the network or record it or whatever and watch AEW live. So in the long run, do you think they could topple NXT from the top of sort of Wednesday's ratings?
It all depends, again, to circle back to the first question about what kind of AEW are we going to get, because it's been very, very much split between the still very niche stuff on Being the Elite compared to the super serious sit-down, intimacy, sports vibe, stakes vibe of the Road 2 series. I think, genuinely, if they can get an audience and build an audience through the storytelling style we've seen on Road 2, I generally think they do have a chance of beating NXT, lack of brand exposure or whatever, because the stars more or less in-ring are comparable. But one thing that was brought into focus to me when I was watching that first episode of NXT was they're really not giving anyone promos. And then I started to think, well, who should they have given a promo who could sell themselves as like a true polymath, like a true all-round proper sports entertainer? And there's not many. Whereas on the All Elite Wrestling roster, you've got 2 10s, 2 absolute 10s. Chris Jericho's a 10 promo. MJF's a 10 promo. Mm-hmm. Kenny Omega is very divisive. He's capable of cutting a 10 promo, but he's mostly like an 8 or a 9.
Doing good stuff on social media as well to get the buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. There's not, on NXT TV, there's not an 8 for me.
Quality of work will always shine through in these situations. So the quality of AEW's promo work on Road 2 has captivated people in such a way because they've got time to produce and time to edit, and it should come out looking perfect. It's a 20-minute YouTube video that it isn't live television. You know what I mean? Like the NXT, you're probably right. There was probably a certain lack of faith in certain guys to do their best work in front of a live audience on the first night without a net. They maybe didn't think, why would we expose the weaknesses of these characters? I still think it's unproven. You're right with Jericho and MJF. It's unproven with certain guys on the underneath element of AEW's roster of how well they can perform with the lights on, live television, not on a Road 2. Brandy Rhodes being a perfect example. In my opinion, one of the promos of the year on Road 2. The one she cut on behalf of Cody to Sean Spears ahead of All Out. And yet, I wouldn't particularly trust her are not that impressive wrestler and are
Sexist.
and a not great live promo compared to some of the other women on her roster, to do the same thing on a live edition of a TV show. I don't think she could sell a match as well as she done that. How many other wrestlers, like Brandy Rhodes, I know she's a EVP, so it's slightly different, but how many of the wrestlers on that roster currently are in that position that are served so much better by the way that they've built their pay-per-views than, you know, how it'll look on television? It's unknown and it's unproven.
I didn't even mention John Moxley.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or Cody, in fact, who's a great promo.
They're not short on guys
Yeah.
because it's closer to WWE's main roster than NXT. I think that's safe to say. There's less developmental prospects when we list these sort of
That's
section
the
headliners.
complete opposite is
Do
true.
you really think so?
Well, look at Jungle Boy.
Well,
he's an actual developmental guy in WWE's eyes.
but
Darby Allin is very young, very raw and inexperienced. The whole selling point is you're seeing guys that you've never seen anywhere adjacent to
I'm
the
not
mainstream.
so sure I agree with that phrase in experience. You would criticise the Performance Centre for not rounding out guys' experience. These guys have come from the independent scene. That's still...
Jungle Boy's been wrestling for like how long?
There's going to be exceptions. I'm not saying that they've not found guys from like the Joey Janela circuit have been going a year, 2 years, and have become like memes. But there's plenty of guys that have done the rounds in the way that the industry used to work, that haven't gone through the Performance Centre. NXT, the biggest criticism leveled
But
against
it's a
NXT.
fallacy that it's developmental NXT.
Well, it is. I totally agree with you there. So what I'm suggesting is that the guys that AEW have got on their undercard are actually better served for this than NXT guys because they've been trapped in the Performance Centre. They're trapped in WWE's...
AEW's going to win. End of podcast.
Let's talk about Cody talking about these 3 hours of All Elite Wrestling, an hour being streamed potentially on Bleacher Report. What do you think of that? Because, you know, one of the big criticisms levelled at WWE and Monday Night Raw is 3 hours is too much.
Right. I got a little bit excited about this, and then Hamflet went, "You hypocritical twat. What do you complain about Monday Night Raw for
Over the
every
desks,
week?"
this came up.
However, this has been kind of a thing in my head for a while. AEW, I don't know why they haven't done this yet, but for various reasons, they need to put dark matches on after those shows. I'm looking at someone like Kenny Omega, who's clearly one of the best wrestlers in the world. He looked way better during last year when he had the G1, where he was getting sharpened constantly. His conditioning was ridiculous. He was entering elite world-class performance after world-class performance. I know, obviously, the G1 schedule's unsustainable for all year round, but what I'm getting at is that there seems to be a bit of rust on him. There's the matches I've seen of AEW of his so far, I've all really enjoyed to varying extents, but it feels like there's a surge missing. Even in the Pac match, which I thought was great, there was that kind of like build and relentless surge and explosive action that he gives us that I just thought, it's not really there. I think he needs to be wrestling every single week to recapture that spark. So I do think, if nothing else, to drive tickets, which are kind of crawling right now, they need to be putting dark match attractions on,
Well, you
because
can put everybody on a poster then.
well, this is it.
Yeah.
And they've said they don't want to overexpose a talent in front of the TV audience, but that doesn't mean you can't have Kenny Omega just sharpening his skills every single week as that top draw, doing a dark match. Possibly, if they just frame it, because it's going to be so hard with the wins and losses thing anyway, if they frame this as, right, you're getting an exhibition match, like an exhibition, doesn't count towards the points tallies, at the end of the night, as a dark match for the paying audience, I would buy that as a friendly, in the same way that people do the exact same thing with WWE live events. They can screen that on Bleacher Report. Oh, here's some exhibition matches. They've got no real build, but they're between the best wrestlers, i.e. the guys who need to be wrestling every week to become the best versions of themselves.
Yeah, like all flippancy aside, like Cody's...
If it's not canon, I'm all right with it. If it's canon, it's too much.
Well, Cody's mention of a third hour is intentionally vague at this point, because something like Sidgwick's pitch, I think we can probably all agree, is perfect for everybody involved. Fans can choose to get involved in that or not. The fans in attendance are well served, and the wrestlers are well served by it. The other side of that is something like the buy-in, which so far has been probably AEW's weakest aspect of their entire output.
Yes.
Has been these pay-per-view pre-shows. Unanimously derided almost after every pay-per-view. They've gotten steadily better, but the bar was so low from where they started that there was really only one way, and that was...
Sounds about like WWE under Paul Heyman, but everyone's jizzing over that. So why don't you jizz over the latest buy-in, mate?
Is there any concern for you
God.
about the most recent report from Meltzer saying that the house shows are tanking because of secondary markets, i.e. people have snatched up the tickets, you know, they sold out.
Big Tony.
Tony Khan himself opening up the wallet and treating himself to a section.
They have been all sold out, and yet now they're being sold on the secondary market for, I saw $8, someone was suggesting somewhere. Is there any concern there in terms of we always deride WWE when there's massive sections blanketed off, and I'm not saying that we're probably going to see that, certainly not for the first few TV shows of AEW, but is there any concern there for you?
For me, yes. They've got way better minds for business and for marketing than me, who's just a wrestling critic. They've got way better minds in place, but for me, it's all about appearances. I know they're trying to make money, but even then, it's like the $20 starting price. They're not going to make a great deal from that.
I
in
admire that
comparison
because they were
to
chasing
WWE.
sellouts, weren't they? It was more
Yeah.
impressive to say we've sold out again versus we've sold 12,000 tickets. You know, I thought that was controlling the narrative for a while, wasn't it? We keep selling out, you know?
For me, I know they're not doing the WWE thing of getting the biggest arena in the biggest, most glamorous cities, and then if they don't sell it out, at least they can say, we'll do this one, because it's all appearances. I really wish, because I kind of suspected that this kind of arena-level hype was unsustainable, I wish they'd done things like gone to the Hammerstein Ballroom. Venues you can guarantee are in hot markets that are intimate and small, that look amazing on television, that were always going to sell out, be full of really boisterous fans, and look great on TV, and look very different on TV. I wish they'd done something more like that than go to like your sort of college basketball arenas that have got loads of tickets, loads of seats, and will look great if sold out and are more of a safe bet. But even that seems way too ambitious.
It's particularly strange because they're quite fortuitous in wrestling. It's odd how people have such an affection for certain venues. Like you mentioned of the Hammerstein Ballroom there, I'm sure sent a memory, a jolt straight into all of our minds of what it looks like or a particular moment or something like that. And Cody's incredible at like legacy booking. He loves it, he lives for it, and yet that's one area where they've seemed to look, I think, in an attempt to try and separate themselves from WWE, to tell towns, you don't have to go to your local venue over there for WWE because we've got a different place where you can come and watch our wrestling. I'm not so sure that was the best strategy. What I did like was the localized marketing, and I think, again, to go back to the idea that if you are going to use like dark segments or dark matches to be able to put all these faces on a poster, if they're going to come to Newcastle, which I'm sure they're going to do a UK tour with this TV show, because there's been plenty of noise made about, you know, having global audience and having a big market over here. Like, to run our local arena and use Newcastle United's colours on the poster of black and white stripes, that speaks to a knowledge of your audience and trying to win the towns back. Because I think AEW, and here's me finally going to have a dig at WWE on this podcast, they're actually suffering from WWE's killing of all the towns. They're suffering from these damaging pictures of the black sheets over the seats. People have become picky over what they're going to spend the money on wrestling-wise. They've been to enough house shows or enough tepid TV tapings where they're no longer going to make the decision to part with
Even Paul Heyman's.
$30, $40 to watch a TV show anymore. Like, because this is the damaging thing. I think TV shows not selling out is far worse than house shows, because sometimes just they got the right guys aren't on top, or the right matches don't really come into place. TV shows, Raw and SmackDown, that's the brand selling itself, and the brand isn't selling itself anymore. And I think what the damage has done been that is that wrestling isn't selling itself anymore. So I don't think they would have anticipated struggling to sell some of these venues out, and they've just been hit by people's malaise for wrestling. That can be turned around by good television. That can be turned around by the momentum of a character getting over out of nowhere. Luchasaurus is a perfect example. He was nothing a year ago. Look where he is now. If he was wrestling in Newcastle, I'd buy a ticket. You know, they can still benefit from the old ways working, having a draw, having one guy that you pay to go and see. And if somebody just gets over on their TV show, you're going to shift a few extra 1,000 tickets to fill that venue. So I don't think it's a worry for them yet. And, you know, Tony buys tickets, he doesn't buy tarp. So it'll always look sold out, even when it's not.
Sure, man. Get your next question.
Let's talk a little bit more about literally the first episode of AEW
Yes.
on TNT. Lots to look forward to. Cody versus Sammy Guevara. And, of course, that match with Chris Jericho and his mystery partners. Before I ask you about who you think should be the mystery partners, do you think a lot of the speculation around NXT, and certainly now following NXT's first TV show, and the speculation that perhaps they're saving something big for that first TV head-to-head with AEW, do you think AEW may get some surprise appearances in there?
I would say almost certainly. Cody is a self-professed WCW mark. He's probably got that Lex Luger on Nitro moment in his head booked before the TV deal was finalised. Honestly, I think it's kind of more important at this point to lean on what your roster's got as much as like some kind of promise that fans will project onto it and it'll never be fulfilled because it's not going to be CM Punk. MJF needs to cut a promo for 5 minutes going down the ramp. That's of primary importance for me because I think he's genuinely the true TV star of the Wednesday Night War, potentially. As for surprises, yep, certainly Cody said, and I can't fathom this because it's like a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show, that only 40% of the roster has so far been revealed, and then Wardlow has been announced in the meantime.
Yeah.
So that's like 40, like 3, 4, 5, I don't know. Apparently there's only 40% of that roster's been announced, which I find incredibly exciting, daunting for how they're going to move all the parts around. But yeah, no idea who. Absolutely no idea who.
Well, obviously the first choice you would think would be LAX from their debut at All
But
Out.
that's no longer a surprise.
But that's gone. This has kind of got to be a ratings drawing surprise. I'm leaning on the Motor City Machine Guns, Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley. They're retired / unretired, depending on if the payday's right. They've got a rich history with the Young Bucks that feeds into the Young Bucks kind of rise through the independent scene. They were kind of the Young Bucks before the Young Bucks came around. They did it once in TNA and it was absolutely miserable because I think the Young Bucks were miserable, so the matches never really delivered. So it's still fresh. And the idea that Chris Jericho, this wrestling megastar, could turn to two guys. He's such disdain for this AEW roster because nobody pays him any respect that he looks outside of that and he looks to somebody brand new on this night when there's all these guys that he potentially choose from. I quite like that.
It's a bit weird. And I'm going to be pedantic here, if I'm allowed to be pedantic with WWE. So Chris Jericho is bringing 2 mystery opponents in a match against 3 of the 4 or 5 guys in charge of hiring people. Surely they should know about it. But it's fine. No one's pointed this out yet, and I think it's because people are so excited that we're long away from the whole being pedantic stage of this sort of thing.
They've kind of gotten away from their EVP thing as best as they can.
Yeah.
As when there's been more wrestling product, they've been able to step away from
Yeah.
this thing that they're the authority figures.
So you're telling me we don't need more authority figures in wrestling?
Well, I mean, there's about 4 on this show already, so I'm hoping they don't. No.
Finally, we of course have the AEW Women's Championship match on the first TV
I
episode.
criticised AEW, for God's sake.
Nyla Rose versus Riho. Who should be crowned the first women's champion in your eyes?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's an unpredictable match, which is good. I think Nyla Rose cut a great promo on one of the Road to All Outs, which is really, really good. And obviously, Riho doesn't speak English natively. So I think in terms of presenting a face to the public, it's got to be Nyla Rose for me. And she's deeply impressed me over the past 2 in-ring appearances. I don't really think she was that great in the Double or Nothing match. A lot of that was because it was a strange bit of booking to overshadow her with Awesome Kong. But her agility that comes out of nowhere that she's shown at Fyter Fest and All Out was great. I think she did well to pivot and helm a chaotic casino battle royale. I thought she did tremendously there. I think she's a great promo. It's got to be Nyla for me.
AEW revealed a beautiful poster for their poorly named wrestling show last night on Twitter. And Nyla Rose...
I saw this argument, by the way.
Stomping ground.
I got the popcorn when you love the poster. We all love the poster.
That's fantastic.
Stunning.
You just don't like the dynamite
It's a
on
bit
it.
lame, isn't it? But anyway, Nyla Rose is on that.
Stomping grounds, is it?
I wish.
Crown Jewel.
Roman Reigns punches the floor on that poster.
Great balls.
If only they had someone who had a stomp who you could use in the poster. But yeah, carry on.
Great balls of fire. Big giant boot for a logo, is it?
Nyla Rose was on that poster, but Riho was not. And cynically,
I like big boots.
I have to say that it feels more and more like the Joshi match, other than being Kenny Omega's indulgence, was to create the idea that they currently have plans for those wrestlers. So putting one in a title match against Nyla Rose, who is a push prospect. If it wasn't Nyla Rose, it might have been Britt Baker or Bea Priestley or certain wrestlers that you can tell they want to put some focus on. It's Nyla Rose this time around. She's on the poster. She was in all the marketing. That awful picture where they were all looking doe-eyed at Tony Khan for that Entertainment Weekly shoot. She's been featured. She's been present the whole way through. And we've seen this year that if you're going to launch a belt, get your first champions right. It happened with Bayley and Sasha Banks. It happened with Titus O'Neil. Ultimately,
Not wrong.
Ultimately, you've got to get your first champion right. It's happened with Chris Jericho. That has been proven already to be the exact right decision. And I think Nyla Rose has shown with her work very, very rapid improvement. She's obviously well liked by everybody there, and is probably going to get more spotlight on the early weeks of TNT than Riho and several other Joshi guys, who I do hope get steady advancement through the roster, but it just feels like at the moment it's getting a load of 6-person matches. Just do that until we figure out how we're going to weave you into storylines.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Nyla Rose probably should be crowned the first AEW Women's Champion in my book. By the way, if you're a fan of Nyla Rose, this weekend we are releasing my interview with her. It'll be available as a podcast, so just search for What Culture Wrestling if you want to listen to that. But wrapping up, exciting times for wrestling fans, NXT, AEW, and looking forward to, well, less than 2 weeks now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been more pedantic about NXT, but I think that's a lot of it is more ingrained from just a dormant, like, years worth of just being sort of disenfranchised with WWE. I think it's a byproduct of it, but on the strength of that first NXT show, certainly the strength of its roster, everything that's been promised to me by AEW and that I've seen just enough of so far, being from the UK, I think at this early stage, I'm going to get knee sleep whatsoever on a Wednesday night.
Being from the UK, ITV4, are you airing AEW or what? Like, I want a reply on Twitter. I want action from AEW.
Have you asked?
Repeatedly.
Have you?
Yeah, I'll retweet it again so you can give it a like or something. I really want to know from ITV4 if this is happening. This has got.
I don't think you're going to get the scoop.
I don't want the scoop.
They're not going to scoop you with a big break in
want an
news.
answer?
It's one of however many Brits is asking about this. Who's got to get the scoop? Oh, Michael Hamflett. Yeah. Here's the announcement.
Look, I'm part of the esteemed wrestling media. We're having this chat right now. No, I do think there's. I don't know. I feel look. I'm
getting anxious.
I'm
mate.
supposedly the anti-AEW guy in this podcast, and I'm feeling anxious that this show's.
I'm getting
away.
anxious.
We would have had this announcement weeks ago. We talked about this just the other day.
Cody, can you not do one of your winking gifts? if I tweet you.
The lapsed fans that were friends of mine that were asking about Double or Nothing because the advertisement of that show was so good, and Chris Jericho was appearing in the middle of Coronation Street and things like that. That's what you want to be hearing for AEW's TV show, and we're 2 weeks out and it's not there. I'm starting to worry.
On a wider
we're going to
point,
have to look for this.
I've
elsewhere.
noticed Canadian fans are in a similar
Yes,
boat with
yeah.
us on Twitter. So
with both shows.
if it's close, he's not shy of doing his little winks. Tony Schiavone, like wink at me, Cody.
Well, I'm already excited, not just for AEW's debut and NXT obviously competing against them, but just for more of this. Make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, for the Wednesday Night War podcast, AEW versus NXT. Pick a side. You're not allowed to enjoy both. That's the rule. Right, let's know
I'm just getting worked into it. You're laughing, but I'm kind of getting worked. But it's part of the fun.
It is part of the rating coming out yesterday was thrilling because I was immediately excited for next week's number and then rubbing my thighs about the prospect, what if AEW gets 10,000 short? I'm going to lord it over Sidgwick on Thursday. Like, yeah.
Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can tweet at us at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
follow Michael Sidgwick at.
Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. As I said, follow us all at What Culture WWE, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling for daily wrestling podcasts. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dudley Boys. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.